Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Our program is about to begin. Please take your seats. Please welcome Carnegie Mellon University's 10th president, Dr. Farnam Jahanian.
Well, good morning, everyone. Happy to be with you on behalf of our partners for this event, the team at the Brookings, of course, led by President Cecilia Rouse, and our neighbors at the University of Pittsburgh, led by Chancellor Joan Gable. I want to welcome everyone to CMU this morning. This event has drawn an impressive lineup of leaders from public, private, government, and academic institutions, including Pennsylvania's Secretary of Department of Community and Economic Development, Rick Seiger. Rick, welcome back. A number of others, of course. R.K. Mellon Foundation Director and CMU Trustee Sam Ryman is with us. Hillman Family Foundation, President Dave Roger. Allegheny Conference CEO Stephanie Pashman. Folks, if I start going through the entire list, we're going to be here all morning. We want to hear from our panelists. But of course, I do want to welcome academic and administrative leadership from Carnegie Mellon, Pitt, Point Park, Duquesne, and others. Thank you all for being here. So happy to see all of you this morning. Your presence here today signals the incredible value of regions driving national innovation and the fact that it's taking place in a city that has emerged as an inspiration and a model for reinvention and collaboration is no coincidence. Pittsburgh is known for being innovative, scrappy, and adaptable. We've succeeded as a region because we know how to work together and because we don't know how to let an opportunity pass us by. These characteristics have served us well throughout history, and they have fueled Western Pennsylvania's rise as one of the nation's greatest hopes for rebuilding America's innovation ecosystem. Today in the US, our research and development enterprise, our innovation ecosystem, is an inflection point. It's vacillating between a remarkable confluence of opportunities and challenges. Three realities in particular make this moment distinctly consequential for the nation. We're experiencing an unprecedented pace and scale of technological advances, a widening talent and economic opportunity gap, and a growing global competition. Let's explore these for just a moment. Today, major leaps toward data-enabled, technology-driven research are impacting a wide range of industries and markets, from healthcare to manufacturing to transportation, state exploration, and even the very essence of scientific discovery itself. Within this exploration of information, of course, AI and generative AI have emerged as perhaps the single most significant intellectual development of our time. And the potential for economic and societal impact of AI is vast, and I'm sure we will hear from our panelists later on today about that. Advances in technology are also transforming our workplace in equally powerful ways. Today, entire industries are in flux, and the race to upskill and reskill is more urgent than ever before. In fact, Harvard Business Review recently reported that the average half-life of skills is now less than 5 years. In some tech fields, it's dipped as low as 2.5 years. That explains why the average tenure of a university president is going down. Of course, as absent intentional, I should say, interventions, our nation runs a risk of inadvertently disenfranchising entire segment of our population, by the way, both in rural as well as urban communities, from fully participating in our emerging innovation economy. And finally, the US has been the envy of the world for the last half century, and we shouldn't be surprised that our global partners and competitors are replicating our extraordinary successful model of an innovation-based economy. In fact, in the 1960s, America commanded about 69% share of the global R&D investment. Today, we're still the largest, but our lead is eroding. And there's a lot of data, of course, to support that. These converging realities have compelled the United States to make bold and historic investments in science, in innovation, in technology as means of advancing U.S. competitiveness. Furthermore, progress here hinges on expanding the geography of innovation to bring the promise of technology and economic opportunities to all Americans. Today, this work is already underway, thanks to some bipartisan work that has taken place, including the CHIPS and Science Act, including the Inflation Reduction Act. And earlier this year, I'm sure you're going to hear this from Secretary Siger, Governor Shapiro announced a statewide economic development plan that prioritizes improving and enhancing regional strength in a number of key areas, including manufacturing, robotics, energy, and life sciences. Make no mistake, place-based economic growth has a key role to play in advancing our national security, our economic competitiveness, and this is a tremendous opportunity, of course, for our region and for the Commonwealth. To this end, Brookings, Pitt, and CMU have assembled an incredible lineup of panelists and speakers to examine the work that's underway in this region and to help us develop a playbook for not only for ourselves to move forward, but also for other regions. To every one of you panelists who's participating, thank you for sharing your thoughts and your expertise with us. And for those of you who are in the audience, I hope that you'll find these conversations informative and, of course, inspiring. You are in for a treat, without any doubt. Recognizing that we have a full day ahead of us, would you please join me in welcoming and extending a warm welcome, I should say, to our next speaker at the University of Pittsburgh, Chancellor, and my friend, Joan Gable. Joan.
Thank you, Farnham, and thank you for hosting us today and for the partnership, and personally, of course, thank you for being such a wonderful partner to me as I've gotten started here in Pittsburgh. And I think as I see my colleague Mark Nordenberg in the room, how wonderful it is to be in a city where our two institutions work together so well, where there's been decades of partnership between our institutions. I think this is part of why we are able to have the conversations that we're having. And as I express appreciation to Brookings and to Dr. Rouse for the conversations that we're going to have today and for initiating this event and for the opportunity that we have, when we think about the journey that this city has been on, and the role that higher ed in particular has the opportunity to play, the fact that we are friends and colleagues and the intellectual environment that allows us to spurn, that allows us to grow, we can't underestimate what that means for us to be collaborators, for us to think about what it means for us to work together in this way. Is precious and something that we have very carefully curated just as human beings working together in a community. And so I'm very grateful to have been able to join that community, and I thank you personally, Farnham, for having extended such a warm welcome to me and allowed me to be part of continuing that tradition here. I also want to thank our shared offices of government relations who help us set up things, wonderful things like this, and opportunities for us to come together as we think about what we do in this community and what we will be doing this fall, which I'm sure will not be dull as we end this academic year and think about what the summer and the next semester is likely to be like. Very excited to lean into what that means here. And at the University of Pittsburgh, we've really been thinking about this as we've endorsed a new strategic plan for the university, Plan for Pitt 2028, which the Board of Trustees just endorsed at our last board meeting in April. This has helped frame our directionality. It builds upon actually a couple of different chapters of strategic planning, really grounded in values for the institution as the public partner in the higher education team that you see represented here today, and a belief in the opportunities and possibilities and anchoring in mission that public institutions bring to the table, and the notion of possibilities and a tagline, if you will, of that it's possible at Pitt. And we believe in that because of the outcomes that you see, not just individually at the University of Pittsburgh, but because of what we've been able to do together, what that's meant for our students in terms of graduation rates and placement, and what that's meant for the kinds of things we've been able to do together that Farnham just described so beautifully in terms of research and the application of that research in terms of the creation of economic development and economic opportunity, and what that's done to lift up this community as it's gone through its roller coaster ride over these last few decades in terms of economic development and outcomes. We really focus on what this also means in terms of the attraction of talent and talent development and new talent as we go into this new chapter. If we don't bring in new interested talent who want to stay here and then become a part of this pipeline of this new sector and the new sectors that will grow as per the governor's economic development plan, that's how we will create the next generations who want to become a part of the cycle that we're growing. 45% of our graduates are coming out of the University of Pittsburgh debt-free, and 98% of our graduates have a job, more than 2/3 of them staying in this region when they finish. And that is the cycle that needs to continue if we're going to see the kind of outcomes that we want to see for the workforce that we need in order for this entire community to become the one that we know it has the potential to be and that we want for it to be. In addition to that, we need to be creating the workforce of the future, not just in the humans that will do the work, but in the sectors that are going to grow and create the jobs that the students want to have. Or we need to rely on those students to create the jobs that we haven't even thought of yet. And that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about today, is that in their innovation mindset, with the support of the faculty and staff who are creating the new thoughts, expanding the knowledge base in partnership with Carnegie Mellon, UPMC, and with the support of the resources that we make available in order for them to be able to make the discoveries that they make. We're able to think about the possibilities of the jobs that don't even exist yet, the sectors that don't even exist yet. This is the kind of thing that you'll hear about from Ken Gabriel around Pitt Bioforge with Sam Riemann and our partnership with Mellon Foundation, and the other types of sectors that we're able to do in clinical sciences, life sciences at Pitt, and the other types of discoveries that you'll hear about through Carnegie Mellon. And in places like the University of Pittsburgh, where we're 237 years old and can think about very legacy traditional types of higher education, we like to think that that legacy lays a foundation that allows us to be very agile looking to the future, that gives us the kind of stability that allows us to take chances and strategic risks. We've been calling them moonshots, not that we made up that word, but that we like to lean into that word and lean into that mindset on behalf of our students and in support of our faculty and staff, so that our students can feel confidence and trust that when they take chances and go into areas of innovation, areas of the future, in partnership with the kinds of innovation that we're able to do with Carnegie Mellon and in a city that is emerging in the way that we see happening in this part of the world and in this region, that there are the opportunities that will be there for them. So we see distinct strengths in this region. We're excited to be in this region, and we're very excited to be able to participate in the discussion that we've laid out today. We feel a lot of optimism about the future, and we're very honored to have the opportunity to be a part of what's going on here today. So with that, please join me in welcoming the president of the Brookings Institute, Dr. Cecilia Rouse. Thank you.
Well, good morning. President Jahani and Chancellor Gable, thank you very much for the very gracious welcome to Pittsburgh. And thanks to Carnegie Mellon University and the University of Pittsburgh for the partnership for today's event. For those of you who don't know us, the Brookings Institution is a nonpartisan think tank based in Washington, D.C. We do research across this country and around the globe to affect policy at local, state, and national and global levels. We are here as part of our Elections 24 Issues at Stake initiative. So as we think about the upcoming election, two statistics from the Pew Research Center jump out at me. First, 78% of Americans believe there's too little attention paid on the important issues facing this nation. And second, 86% of Americans believe that, quote, Republicans and Democrats are more focused on fighting each other than solving problems, unquote. In short, the vast majority of Americans want more policy over politics. So our Election 24 initiative is committed to focusing on substantive issues affecting Americans and not the horse race. Today, we will focus on one of those substantive issues, revitalizing American industry. Pittsburgh is the perfect place to do this. It has been the model of revitalization over many decades. And Brookings is proud to have been able to partner with so many talented organizations in the city, many of whom are represented here today on both the stage and in the audience. Carnegie Mellon, thank you for hosting us, and I'm confident there will be a very rich discussion today. So to frame the issue, I would like to introduce Alan Berube, who's the Interim Vice President and Director of Brookings Metro. Alan.
Thank you very much, Cecilia, and thank you to President Jahanian, Chancellor Gable, and all of our friends at Carnegie Mellon and Pitt for your partnership in this event and many things over the years with the Brookings Institution. So let's see. So I'm going to say I need to turn it on and then this never ever works, does it? Thank you. So as Dr. Rouse said, now it's on? Get out of town. Look at that. Oh, yeah. Okay. So the title of this forum, right, as Dr. Rouse said, Selection 24 Issues at Stake. The title of today's forum is Revitalizing American Industry. So why is this an issue at stake in this year's elections? I'd posit that the underlying issue isn't whether or how we should revitalize industry per se. It's how the United States can maintain leadership in a competitive global economy, leadership that creates good jobs and rising standards of living for everyone. And at Brookings Metro, we've shown that a particular set of industries is critical to that global leadership. We call them advanced industries. These advanced industries are defined by their substantial investment in research and development and their outsized employment of STEM workers. And they include fields such as aerospace and auto manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, and digital services. Relative to their share of the US workforce, advanced industries account for outsized shares of private sector R&D spending, patents, exports, and economists estimate that due to their high productivity and long supply chains, each advanced industry job generates another 2.2 jobs in the local economy. The sector is also the economy's prime site for innovation, so where physics and chemistry collide to yield powerful advanced materials, where biology and manufacturing combine to accelerate drug discovery and deployment, where cutting-edge applications of AI are poised to transform whole industries. So in these ways, advanced industries are the crown jewels of US economic dynamism and the fuel for rising standards of living. That brings us to the challenge, and I think President Jahanian alluded to this. America's advanced industries have struggled over the longer term. The US share of global output in these industries dropped from 29% in 2001 to just 18% in 2018. What explains this drift? Well, some argue that it's just the higher costs that US businesses face for labor, for taxes, and regulation compared to their counterparts in developing economies. Others fault lax trade policies for allowing rising nations, particularly China, to establish, and some say unfairly exploit, competitive footholds in these industries. And still others point to public underinvestment in research, in education and training, and in infrastructure. But to understand the path forward, it's crucial to recognize the highly localized nature and value of the advanced industry sector. Advanced industries cluster predominantly in US metropolitan areas. That's where they benefit from the combination of several things: key innovation infrastructure in universities and large anchor employers, highly skilled workforces, extensive supplier networks, and access to markets. In fact, US metro areas account for 86% of all advanced industry jobs nationwide. So that's not only these iconic clusters that everybody knows, like software in Silicon Valley and life sciences in Boston. It's also advanced instrumentation in Milwaukee. It's material science in Phoenix. It's aerospace engineering in Wichita, and hundreds more specialized clusters. Here in Pittsburgh, of course, advanced industry was once synonymous with steelmaking, the source of the region's economic prosperity throughout much of the 20th century. And over the past 30 plus years, we've seen deliberate strategic actions here in Southwest Pennsylvania, including by our partner institutions, Carnegie Mellon and Pitt, begin to transform that legacy into new specializations. So today, the region's three largest advanced industries are actually computer systems design, scientific research and development, and high-tech instrument manufacturing. Yet, the full promise of Pittsburgh's next economy, as Brookings called it in a 2017 report, remains unrealized. Our recent Metro Monitor does show that the Pittsburgh region outperformed its peers over the past decade on growth in productivity and growth in earnings. And I think this partly reflects an increase in the size of the region's advanced industry sector over this period. However, the region's top-flight research assets are not yet yielding top-flight job creation and inclusive growth. Advanced industries here comprise a smaller share of jobs than is the case nationally, and that underperformance in turn reflects in Pittsburgh's ranking just 54th among 56 large metro areas for overall job growth, 50th for the increase in its employment rate, and near the bottom for its progress in closing economic disparities across communities and across racial groups. Pittsburgh is far from the only region confronting these challenges. As you look across our nation's industrial heartland, you see other centers of powerful university-based research, high-tech production know-how, enviable access to skilled workers, and like Pittsburgh, many of these regions too struggle to retain their historic advantages or bring new cutting-edge specializations to scale. So advanced industries either lag national benchmarks for size, as the case in Baltimore, Louisville, and Winston-Salem. They lag for growth, as in Akron, Hartford, and Rochester, or they lag in both of those dimensions, as in Indianapolis, Memphis, and Syracuse. And the consequence is that residents of these regions enjoy fewer economic opportunities than equally talented, equally entrepreneurial Americans elsewhere. And as my Brookings colleague Mark Muro has observed, this geographic imbalance itself represents a grave national challenge. Mark's research shows that between 2005 and 2017, just 5 metro areas accounted for more than 90% of the nation's high-tech innovation sector growth. This hyperconcentration itself exacts significant costs. It's spiraling home prices in these superstar hubs, it's eroding economic capacity in underperforming regions, and of course, growing social and political polarization. So this brings us to this question of whether and how federal policies should support America's advanced industries. And notably, the United States federal government has acted throughout history to expand our nation's technological and industrial capacity. To Alexander Hamilton's support for a national manufactory in northern New Jersey, public financing of plants during World War II, high-tech spending during the space race, and immigration policies that today support the presence of highly skilled workers from around the world. And Southwest Pennsylvania is a case study in Washington's role. Pitt is the 6th largest recipient of research dollars from the National Institutes of Health. Carnegie Mellon is the 2nd largest recipient of federal research grants for computer and information sciences. And this funding has helped seed many of the bold breakthroughs behind the region's emerging industries. Yet, university-based innovation alone isn't sufficient to generate commercially viable applications, new companies, and employment growth that reaches diverse workers in both core urban and outlying communities. And knowing this, local leaders have made strategic bets to capitalize on Pittsburgh's world-class research assets. And one such effort we're going to hear about today in our second panel are investments that Pitt and the RK Mellon Foundation have made in BioForge, a new facility for the manufacturing of cell and gene-based therapies. But it will take more than local bootstrapping to build competitive industries and plentiful jobs at scale. Central governments around the world are adopting more purposeful policies to catalyze local investment in business clusters and nationally relevant advanced industries, and that includes the US federal government. 3 major economic spending bills have unleashed trillions in direct public investment and investment incentives toward the nation's advanced industry sector, a good deal of it actually with bipartisan support. At the same time, private companies have announced nearly $700 billion in investment commitments for these key industries, partly in response to these new federal efforts. An important feature of these bills, which I think we'll talk about today, roughly $80 billion by our estimates, is their support for place-based strategies. And these are strategies that intervene in specific local clusters to foster new investment potential. Many of them explicitly aim to invest in regions that can widen the US map of advanced industries. So our third panel today will discuss how the Pittsburgh region is using one of those programs, the Build Back Better Regional Challenge, to broaden its robotics cluster, ensure its economic benefits reach a diverse set of the region's workers, entrepreneurs, and communities. And state policies, too, can complement federal efforts to catalyze advanced industry growth. In our first panel, we'll examine the role of state policies here in Pennsylvania as well as federal policies in stabilizing and growing the region's advanced manufacturing sector. So continuing these approaches, where government invests directly or indirectly in advanced industry companies and local clusters, represents one possible direction for the future of federal policy. Other directions would feature broader tax and regulatory relief, or perhaps higher trade barriers for foreign advanced industry products and services. Voters' choices this fall will determine which paths policymakers in Washington, Harrisburg, and elsewhere are likely to pursue. So in closing, I think there are indeed critical issues at stake this year for the prosperity of this region and for the nation as a whole. So I'm eager to get into our panels, each of which will reflect on this interplay of local initiative and federal and state policies needed to revitalize American industry and unleash shared prosperity. So please join me in welcoming our first panel on revitalizing advanced manufacturing in the region. It will be moderated by my colleague and friend, Amy Liu, Presidential Advisor and Senior Fellow at Brookings.
Great. Good morning. It's really wonderful to be here, and I want to just take a moment to thank all those who've joined us live on the webcast for being with us this morning as well. So my job this morning is to basically situate Alan's framing more deeply into the experience of Southwest Pennsylvania, which, like many older industrial cities, as Alan described, has been working hard for decades to both reinvent and revitalize its advanced manufacturing sector. We are really fortunate this morning to have two leaders who are very familiar with the role of federal, state, and local policies on the future of manufacturing and economic growth overall. We have Secretary Rick Steiger here, who leads Pennsylvania's primary community economic development agency, and he's also overseen similar programs in the state of Virginia and the federal government. We also have Petra Mitchell, who is the CEO of Catalyst Connection, which works directly with small and mid-sized manufacturers. And she herself has also worked in manufacturing, having been employed in what is now GE Aviation. So I'm going to start with Secretary Steiger. I just want to mention that we actually have a lot of viewers on the webcast who come from states as diverse as Ohio, Michigan, Tennessee, Colorado, including your former state of Virginia. Mm-hmm. So I really want you to take a moment to give our local and our national audience just your own version of what has been the Southwest Pennsylvania's manufacturing story and history, and what you think are really the challenges this region faces now with that.
Sure, thanks so much, and thanks for having me today. It's really good to be back home. As folks know, I worked here for a long time. It's great to see so many colleagues. Thanks, Farnham and Chancellor Gable and Dr. Rouse for having me. There's been many books, and tons of research done on this sort of industrial heritage of Pennsylvania. So I'll be really quick. I guess I think there's kind of two core questions. One is, there was a massive economic dislocation, right? Like when I was a little kid, unemployment in this area was like 15%, right? And the reason it was so low is because so many people left. And that really leads, I think, to the second question, which is really substantial demographic challenges as a result of that dislocation, which, let's be honest, are still with this region today. And so I think, as we look ahead, I guess I would think about kind of two things. One is, and every speaker really has alluded to this thus far, Pittsburgh, and I see, Bill Flanagan here, he's like the dean of this point. But, Pittsburgh can work together because people are good people, but also because they sort of have to. And you see, actually, this room is a terrific example of that. You have universities, you have businesses, you have foundations, you have others who, even though it's hard and even though not everyone always gets what they want, can kind of come together and build out a plan for the region. And that's been a characteristic of this region for many decades. This decade is no different. You'll hear about some of the specific examples later today. But I think that's sort of especially important now, because one of my kind of core observations after a little over a year in this job is that no matter whether you're a big community or a small community, if you don't have a plan, like if there's not like a set of things that you want to try to accomplish in just this incredibly competitive global economy, it's difficult to do that. And so I think as we look ahead, and I know we'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, what we want to do at the state level is try to be a really good partner to you in your plan. We want to create tools. We want to create a really aggressive and sort of hyper-competitive framework that you can operate in to recruit and retain companies, to drive your innovation economy, and to create the sort of enabling environment to make this a great community. Things like, main streets and workforce development, in addition to the kind of core innovation domain that we were talking about a minute ago. So there's a lot to do here, but as someone who grew up here and worked here for many years in this domain and continues to come back constantly, basically, I'm really optimistic, actually, about the future of Southwest Pennsylvania.
That's great. I think we'll come back and talk more about the kind of strategies that are kind of underway right now, but I do want to turn to Petra and have you first describe to everyone here in the room what does Catalyst Connection do, and in your own words, what do you see as the most pressing, unique challenge facing the advanced manufacturing sector right now here in Southwest PA?
Great. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you also for having me today. As many of you know, I love talking about manufacturing in our community, so this is great for me. So Catalyst Connection's an economic development organization. We're dedicated to serving our region's small and medium-sized manufacturers. And as of today, we have 2,800 of those establishments. They're contributing over $12 billion to our regional output, employing over 90,000 workers. This is a substantial sector in southwestern Pennsylvania. And Catalyst Connection has been providing them management consulting, technical assistance, workforce development for over 35 years. We've been around for a long time. And as Secretary Siger pointed out, there has been industrial decline during this period. There's no doubt. But I like to point out that the companies that are here today, they're the ones that have successfully diversified. They have turned away from declining sectors and entered into new, modern, growing sectors. And many times, they were the only companies, or are the only companies, that are offering that glimmer of hope in their local community, that are offering those jobs, those families, those opportunities to stay where they grew up, to live where they want to live, and those kinds of things. So I think manufacturing has got a really good story to tell, even though we've had this industrial decline. And I think the future is really, really bright. And you asked about challenges. Obviously, workforce development's our biggest challenge. there's no doubt about that. And we can talk some more about that. But there's many other challenges, in terms of technical assistance, technology, the kinds of things we're working on under our Build Back Better coalitions, capital, you name it, we could talk about those things.
Yeah, I think we're going to hear from the next two panels some deeper strategies around each of the different sectors that really make up the advanced manufacturing economy here. But I do want to hear what are the kind of signature efforts underway now in your mind. I do think when you look at the history of tumult facing this region, you've had trade shocks, you've had automation. We now have a new wave of technological change coming through our industries. It's constant adaptation through all of our sectors. So given that, to keep competitive and to keep growing, what are the one or two things the state's doing to respond to the current moment? What are you doing as an MEP? And then I want to spend time, I'm so sorry. I want to spend some time talking about then the role of federal state policy. So we'll talk about what's happening now.
Yeah, terrific. This is a great opportunity for me to just plug our new economic development strategy. When Governor Shapiro took office a little more than a year ago, we came into a state with extraordinary assets, right? Yeah. Pennsylvania has the universities that we're here dealing with today. We have, just in Southwest Pennsylvania, 2,800, productive manufacturers. And you saw from the slides, right, we have not seen in the innovation domain the conversion of those assets into job growth. And even outside these traditional high-growth industries we're talking about, you've seen some stagnation, especially in certain regions of the state, like highly variable growth or lack of growth across Pennsylvania. And so we wanted to build a plan that was relevant to all regions of the state, relevant to all people that live here, which is hard in a diverse state, but also like put a stake in the ground and said, sort of, here's what we want to do. And so, let me just highlight a couple of specific things that I think are really important, and happy to talk more about others as well. The first thing we learned from a deep dive in the research, from talking to people operating in this environment, companies, real estate professionals, because this is an old place, because in a lot of parts of the state, including this one, our topography is really challenging, we don't have actually real estate solutions for the kinds of significant advanced manufacturing opportunities we're talking about. Like I really liked your chart a minute ago with all the boxes of chips boxes and all these boxes. A lot of those companies that are benefiting from this federal stimulus cannot locate here because there's literally not a place to put them. And so Governor Shapiro has proposed $500 million in a statewide site development program. The second thing I would mention, which I think is really cool, and this, I'm partially mentioning this because Mark Miro's here and it's kind of his idea, which is like the federal Build Back Better program, like tech hubs, like some of these other place-based kind of innovation plays that the federal government has put forward, we have proposed a regional competitiveness challenge for Pennsylvania. This is based, I think, in some part at least, due to the great work at Brookings, work of many of our former colleagues in the EDA and other parts of the federal government, NSF. And we think that actually, I don't want to say forcing, but let's say incentivizing regions to come up with a set of ideas that they think are smart, that may not actually have relevance all across Pennsylvania. For example, in the powdered metals manufacturing industry in Elk County and parts of Northwest PA, that's probably not something we would want to drive statewide. But for that part of the state, it's actually an enormously impactful employer. There's workforce challenges, there's infrastructure challenges. Let's kind of get at those things at a hyper-local level to try to drive them forward. So I'm excited about that program, and I think other states have tried this with some success. Certainly, I think you're seeing a lot of examples of success at the federal level, and we want to learn and move that forward. So those are a couple of examples of kind of marquee initiatives we're going to move forward this year.
Petra?
So I'm glad you mentioned MEP. MEP is the Manufacturing Extension Partnership. This is federal funding that supports small and medium-sized manufacturers all over our country. So every manufacturer in our country has access to a program like ours. And what that does for us here, it gives us those valuable resources to help manufacturers with sort of the front end of technology adoption, advanced industries, and those kinds of things. So we can help companies learn about them, assess, plan, business case analysis, do that initial development, and then turn that over to the private sector. Now, what I like to do, just to tie those dots together, when the governor's plan to invest in new site development comes to fruition, we want to have lots of new manufacturing facilities come to southwestern Pennsylvania. But we want them to use local suppliers, local supply chains, local companies. And those companies have to be competitive. They have to be highly productive. They have to be sophisticated. They have to meet all the requirements for that particular industry. And that's where the MEP program, matched with the Industrial Resource Center program, the state-funded program, that is going to be critical to really make all of this happen for our community.
So let's talk about the role of federal policy. As Alan outlined in his presentation, federal government through decades has always leaned in some way towards growing different industries and sectors in the country. As you think about your strategies and your history of working on this through multiple administrations and Congresses, what federal policies have been helpful and what federal policies have been harmful? Petra, do you want to start?
Well, certainly federal policies that invest in certain sectors, certain supply chains have really been noticeable in our community. So for example, the decline of the coal industry. For many years, those declines have been occurring. We've had, and still do, have many suppliers in that industry. And so as the federal government establishes policies around coal, we have to help those suppliers then either diversify or figure out some other strategy so that they can remain viable and continue to grow. So that's an example. Now, as pointed out earlier, federal policy investments in infrastructure, clean energy, the same thing. these are now growing sectors. We need to help manufacturers participate and take advantage of their fair share of those opportunities.
Yeah, let me chime in, and I'll be transparent. I did not prepare for the harmful question, so I was thinking about that a little bit. But on the helpful side, I mean, I'd use two examples, right, to sort of illustrate this very directly. One is a Pittsburgh one, which is the National Robotics Engineering Center at Carnegie Mellon, which was seeded by, someone here will know the exact number, but let's say a NASA grant in the late 90s when NASA was interested in looking at some robotics applications in space. Fast forward, 30 years. You have like an elite, one of the top applied robotics research labs in the world that has spun out, company after company. So I think the federal government investing in these kind of enabling pieces, whether it's research and development or frankly things like transportation and housing, is important. But there's also the sort of applied side, let's say, and in particular, this administration has been focused, as you pointed out in the presentation, on these kind of place-based investments, and I think that's really important too. And I think that as we look ahead, as we build out our strategy for the state, we were keenly aware of and taking into account this sort of unprecedented, or let's say generationally relevant federal investment in broadband, in semiconductor, in energy, in lots of different domains. So we would sort of be crazy as we took a scan of the overall landscape. We were looking at the macroeconomy, we were looking at Pennsylvania's strengths and weaknesses, but we also had to look at, maybe in a more profound way than we would have 5 years ago or 10 years ago, the landscape of federal funding. And so we're excited to be partnering with semiconductor supply chain companies to grow in PA. We're excited to, for the first time ever, have parts of Pennsylvania fully connected by 2030 to universal high-speed internet access, which opens the door to a set of not just development, but a set of residents that maybe wouldn't have been able to locate in some of those parts of Pennsylvania before. So I think the kind of melding of federal and state policy is important here, always important in any time frame, but especially important now, just because of the really generational size and scale of these investments.
Since you mentioned a lot of these investments that have at least been recently passed by the Congress and embraced by the current administration, how they've landed in this region and in this state, I do want to just press a little bit more as we think about the future is which of those strategies, is there bipartisan support consistently around these place-based, sector-based strategies? How do you see that playing out?
What we tried to do in our plan was take a really deep dive into the data, talk to as many people as we possibly could around Pennsylvania, businesses, labor leaders, university leaders. I talked to a bunch of people in this room I can see right here and said, what's actually happening in the operating environment? Like, how is this working for you? Actually, folks like Petra who are like working, hand in hand with manufacturers every day are really important to that. And we tried to understand our current state of play. We tried to look at macro factors for where we believe the economy is going, but of course that's difficult to know. Yeah. And we tried to be smart. And so we selected a set of industries where we think Pennsylvania has not just, let's say, a right to win, like where we have excellence. Two we're going to talk about today, robotics and life sciences, where there's no question we have excellence across the state, actually, but especially here in Pittsburgh. But also places where we want to win, right? We also have excellence in global distribution, but the wages for those roles and the sort of like multiplier effects of those roles are not as high. And so here are industries where we think we can win and where we want to win. And thus far, at least in Harrisburg, though my boss is fond of saying, he's the only governor in the country with a divided legislature, I think response to the plan has been positive. And it's because people understand that we've got to compete to win, right? And winning means lots of things. It means, boosting our innovation ecosystem and elevating some of the numbers you pointed out, which are tough. But it also means helping every region of the state succeed in whatever that means for them. And I think we need to be transparent and real. And I think the Build Back Better competition, which you'll hear about shortly, talks about that these innovation industries, though located in urban areas, have the potential to have real positive impacts in rural areas and across all communities. But it takes like real intentionality to do that, like real programming and real focus on that. And that's a place where, from a policy perspective, we want to work as well. Innovation is not just about Carnegie Mellon and West Philly. Innovation is for all of Pennsylvania, and let's go out and make that real.
Petra, let me ask you a question about state policy, because Secretary Steiger is going to be biased here. We know this election season isn't just about federal positions, the White House and the Congress. There's a lot of state legislatures that are also up for election this fall. Talk about the role of state policy in helping manufacturing adapt and remain innovative. What's most helpful that you would like to see coming from the state?
Yeah, thank you. I think state policy is critically important in some of the infrastructure kinds of things that Secretary Steiger already mentioned. But two other things I would say is match. So federal funding typically requires a lot of match. And so that match can come from state funding and private industry. And so to the extent that the state can contribute to that is critically important. I think the other area is workforce development. That's a critical need, again, among manufacturers, among all advanced industries, and the state plays a critical role in STEM policies, in K through 12 education, in post-high school education. And now I think the future there is around apprenticeship programs. And again, the state is playing a critical role in defining, supporting, and even providing financial and technical assistance for apprenticeship programs.
Can I just build on that quickly? I kind of feel like there's broadly two categories of stuff that we want to fund. One thing is the enabling infrastructure stuff. And actually what Petra was talking about is,
What do you say, when you say enabling infrastructure, give examples. What do you mean by that?
Our education system,
Yep.
our higher education system, our transportation system, housing, supports for the innovation ecosystem in some cases, things that are not necessarily, direct interventions into an industry or with a company.
Yep.
But we've got to make sure that, frankly, main streets, beautiful communities, these are things that we believe are required to sort of attract the next, to grow, to attract the next great company, to make sure that the next great company that spins out of one of these terrific universities, stays here. And then there's a second category of stuff, which is direct interventions, whether it's incentivizing a company to come here or a significant life science play like the Bioforge. Those are both really important. You can't afford, I think, to focus on one at the expense of the other. But of course, we've also got to make choices. And so the balance between those, where we sort of decide to fund and focus energy initially versus over the course of, for example, in this case, a 10-year plan, I think it's something we spend a lot of time thinking about, the sort of careful sequencing of initiatives and funding to maximize the impact.
I'm going to ask you each one more question, and while I do that, or before I do that, I want to let you know that we're going to turn it over to the audience for a few minutes of questions too, so think about the question you want to ask. So let me close with the future and the future role of federal policy. When you look ahead to 2025, what is the one or two big ideas you would like to see from the administration or Congress?
Well, for me, it's very easy because I think it's critically important that programs like the MEP program, the IRC program, continue to grow and be funded.
IRC is?
The Industrial Resource Center, which provides that valuable match to the federal MEP program. And in fact, the IRC program preceded MEP, so I'm using a lot of acronyms, and was the model for this national program. So companies all over our country have the benefit of this program that was actually designed and established right here in Pennsylvania. But it's critically important, again, to be able to provide the resources, the technical assistance to small companies that for any small company is virtually impossible to know everything you need to know about every new market opportunity, every regulation, every rule, every this, every that. And I think the role of technical assistance in that is critically important.
This is a great question, and I'm going to answer it slightly differently, which is to say I think we want a really strong partner. In the same way that, everyone in this room in Southwest Pennsylvania expects and should get from us, a very focused, very active, thoughtful, and willing partner to try to move forward your strategies to grow and win in this global economy. I'd like to see that at the federal level. And I think that key policies, key funding decisions matter a lot. Of course, if I were still at Carnegie Mellon, I would say, more research is needed, as they say, right? Increase R&D funding. I believe in that. But I actually think that it's a complicated world out there, and there are incredibly important and significant macro trends that are impacting, Farnham mentioned a few of them, that are impacting every company, every state in different ways. And having that kind of willing and open partnership with the feds at many different agencies and many different domains, I think has been really valuable for us and will, I hope, continue to be in a bipartisan way. I think this is important as Pennsylvania positions itself to compete and win and to address some of those, sobering challenges, especially in this part of the state that were noted by the prior speaker.
Great, thanks. Okay, it is your turn. Are there any questions for the panelists, for Petra or Secretary Seiger? Great. And please introduce yourself.
This is going to be a tough one.
Don Carter, recently retired from School of Architecture here. My question is to follow up on the shared prosperity issue in our state. Each of our major metropolitan areas is surrounded by rural counties or suburban counties and center of the state. And there are places that just don't have access to the resources that either of you are talking about. So could you both expand a little bit more about how your programs go beyond Allegheny County and Philadelphia County?
I can start. Don, good to see you. Great question. This is a critical point. Like, every place in Pennsylvania matters. Full stop. Many places in Pennsylvania are struggling. Many places in Pennsylvania are doing exceedingly well. So how do we balance the needs of all these places with a set of investments and policies that we believe will be sort of broadly beneficial? And I think the way I think about it is there's a bunch of direct things that we want to do that will directly help certain places. So let's just pick, Mercer County, nearby, a more rural county than here. We want to invest in main streets. We want to put $500 million in industrial site development. Those folks should, apply to get some of those dollars. We want to we want to launch, as I pointed out before, this regional competitiveness challenge where there's no reason that portions of Northwest Pennsylvania couldn't come together to sort of build out a plan where we want to help and fund that plan at scale. But at the same time, we also know, and a lot of what today's activity and event is predicated on, that like where the world is going, where the economy is going, is in these innovation-based industries. We happen to, as a state, have a ton of capability in some of the fastest growing industries in the whole world. And so how do we leverage those, not just to grow, as you point out, the Oakland neighborhood, but to grow all of Pennsylvania? And I think there's a few ways, and Petra should really talk about this. One way is through workforce training activities to make sure that folks from all over Pennsylvania have access to those jobs. One way is through supply chains, and I don't want to steal your thunder, so I'll just say that, and Petra should expand. But there's a bunch of other ways too, and one way is actually to provide entrepreneurial activities and sort of opportunities for folks all across Pennsylvania, which we do and hope to expand. So not an easy question to answer, but I guess I would just emphasize, this is really at the top of our mind. Like, this doesn't work. We're not doing it right if it's not impactful for all communities in Pennsylvania and all the people that live in those communities. And that's a big challenge before us.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I would say fully, 2/3 of the manufacturers in our community are outside of Allegheny County. And we are very, very proactive in making sure we're reaching that broad geography. And we're actually measured by how well we distribute our resources across the region and across the communities. And I think the other part of that is our partnerships. We partner with local providers, local economic development organizations, local schools, local industrial parks to really create those smaller regional collaborations, let's say, for example, in Uniontown or in New Kensington or Johnstown, and establish sort of those micro collaborations to support those companies directly in their local communities. It's a very important part of our strategy.
Any other questions? If not, then I'm going to take a couple questions that came in from online. And both of the questions are workforce related. So Petra, we'll have you start first, and then Secretary Seiger, if you want to add. These come from questions from a Leo from Washington, D.C., if you're still on, and one from Tim, who's from Austin, Texas. And these two questions are pretty related. One question is, does modern manufacturing have any role for large numbers of relatively unskilled workers? And so that's a yes-no. So I don't like yes-no questions. The second question is really about strategy. How can state and local agencies ensure that workers are trained and upskilled to meet what are the new kinds of jobs now needed in manufacturing? And then on the flip side, there are a lot of small, mid-sized manufacturers that haven't quite made the pivot themselves in how to rethink its workforce in light of changing demands from their supply chain relationships. So there's both how to work with workers and then how do you work with firms given these realities. So it's kind of a three-part question about is there a future for relatively unskilled labor in manufacturing, and how do we help workers and manufacturers adapt?
Well, I could start with the first question. I would say the answer is more along there's many opportunities for entry-level workers. And so entry-level workers in manufacturing typically have a high school diploma or equivalent and then gain their skills through on-the-job training and as incumbent workers. And so there are many, many opportunities to secure or to get those kinds of job opportunities. Now, that's not to say you don't need some preparation for those jobs, like basic employability skills, mechanical aptitude, some problem solving, those kinds of things. But those can be acquired in high school. They can be acquired as job seekers. But those opportunities are definitely available for our community.
And given the rise of technology today, what kind of skills are you seeing, Petra, is really needed in a manufacturing firm now?
Yeah, the skills are basically the type of skills you need to operate and maintain sophisticated equipment. And so those, again, can be learned. They can be learned on the job. They can be learned through apprenticeship programs. They're computer-based skills. And then they need to be augmented with, again, soft skills. So companies are looking for individuals that can communicate, that can work in a team, that can do basic problem solving, that have some leadership capacity and capability. The two of those combined are really, again, can be learned, and those opportunities can be provided to a wide swath of people in our community, people from typically disadvantaged or underrepresented groups. The opportunities are definitely there for them.
Secretary
Yeah, I
Seiger.
would just build on that and say that, one of the core proposals, the sort of core tenets of Governor Shapiro's approach is that sort of every Pennsylvanian should be able to chart their own path. Like if you want to go to an elite university like this one, you should do that. If you want to go get a technical degree or you want to enter the workforce and get on to job training, like you should do that. And we should honor those paths sort of equally and recognize that they're both critically important, not just for those individuals to create sort of family-sustaining livelihoods, but to our economy, right? So that's point one. Point two is actually, this is a good example from just yesterday. I was in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, which is nowhere near here, in case anyone was wondering. And Penn College of Technology is there, which is like an affiliate of Penn State. This place is unbelievable. They have like 4,500 students in just like a hyper-focused job training, corporate-driven set of areas, right? So they have the largest welding program, I believe, in the country. They told me that yesterday, so we could fact check it. They have extraordinary capability in trades, in even up to bachelor's degrees in engineering that are really sort of hyper-focused on serving industry, and they've had a ton of success doing it. So as we look at models, Petra mentioned apprenticeships. We love that model. The kinds of technical training that we're doing, let's make sure that it's not just training folks for jobs of today, but as Jim Garrett, who I see here, the provost of CMU, would say, like training people in like a core set of skills that may be relevant to a job that doesn't even exist yet today. And so I think that we've got to up our game in training, and we intend to do it. That's through funding models, it's through policy, it's through a whole set of interventions at the state level. And again, to just return to my earlier point, this is like a great example of, let's say, like the ecosystem or the environment within which businesses compete in Pennsylvania. The better our system of K-12, career technical, higher education is, sure, the more attractive we are as a business location, the more our tax base grows in communities, the more people want to live here, right? These things are related. And I think we have no choice but to sort of invest in them and focus on them in parallel.
Great. Any other questions? I'm going to just ask one final one, and then we will wrap up. Are you? Which is that Alan is, in his presentation, kind of summarized that the current Congress and administration have invested trillions of dollars in infrastructure, in clean energy, in innovation-enabled technologies, and billions in place-based industrial strategies. Administrations come and go, and those investments can ebb and flow. If those investments stop, what impact would it have on this region, and can this region go it alone?
Well, the investments that we're seeing lately are significant, no doubt about it. We are seeing companies coming to this area that I personally could never have imagined the volume and the amount of technology and the amount of investment that companies are making in our area. So I'm very, very pleased to see that. But I guess what I would say is, I continue to see our role as to building up local suppliers, local supply chains, and help them to become very agile so that, if a certain sector is no longer in favor, they're able to pivot into another sector. And there's always going to be some sector that's in favor. And so that, again, is our job, is to make this a very resilient, agile community that we can pivot from one area to another.
Yeah, I think it's well said. I also think that when we do planning at the state level or here at the regional level, we sort of plan within the broad context. And so there are these macro trends which we can take advantage of, or in some cases, not take advantage of. But it's very difficult for us to, for example, influence like the global rise of AI and autonomy, right? That's happening. So how do we take advantage of it? And I think that the federal funding environment is similar. We can advocate, we can be very clear with the federal government what we think is important and what's not. In fact, Governor Shapiro has literally a whole team of people led by a colleague of mine whose only job is to work with the federal government to try to maximize the types and amounts of funding coming to Pennsylvania from these unprecedented investments. Many states, in fact, actually most states, have such a capability. But should that environment change for whatever reason, and should our advocacy to maintain some of those funds fall short, we gotta press on. And I would like to think that the kind of core capabilities that we have in Pennsylvania and in this region in particular are such that we could weather that. We have exceptional companies, manufacturing, supply chain, universities, labor, foundations, et cetera. This region has weathered some of the toughest economic headwinds in the history of the country, with the downfall of steel. And there's no reason that the future shouldn't be bright with smart planning and with a continued, at least as long as we're in this job, as I'm in this job, a really willing and energized partner in the state to help this region accomplish its goals.
Well, I want to really thank both Secretary Steiger and Petra for joining the conversation today. I think what you got was a real sense that over many decades, it's just really critical to see federal, state, and local public-private sector partnerships continue regardless. So thank you very much. Please join me in thanking them. And it is my pleasure now to bring back Alan Berube up to the stage with and the panelists for the next conversation.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, Amy and I are just going to pass the mic back and forth for the rest of the program today. So, well, I'm really pleased to be back up here, not alone this time, but with three esteemed panelists for our next conversation on translating life science research strength into commercial prospects. As you've heard in, I think, everybody's remarks today, life sciences represents a really critical, emerging, advanced industry here in Southwest Pennsylvania, one that Secretary Siger just said you all have a right to win in. And it's been, of course, a focus of recent federal and state policies, too. So I think no better set of folks available to describe where they see this region today in the journey toward building a world-beating life sciences cluster, to reflect on what's working as well as maybe what's missing, and then to reflect on what federal and state policies they see as critical to unlocking broader sustainable opportunity here. So starting at the end, we have Sam Ryman, of course, director of the R.K. Mellon Foundation, Ken Gabriel, the CEO of Pitt Bioforge, and Suma Krishnan, president of research and development for Crystal Biotech. So let's get into the discussion. And Sam, I guess I'd like to start with you. And I wonder if you could just lay out a bit of what the challenge has been for life sciences growth here in Pittsburgh and Southwest Pennsylvania from your vantage point, and how the region, including the R.K. Mellon Foundation, is moving to address that problem. And in particular, like, what made you see this as a major opportunity or an imperative for philanthropy?
Thank you, Alan, and thank you again, everyone, for being here today. It's a pleasure to be part of the panel and to have this great conversation. For the foundation, the life sciences has been an area of interest going back to our founding in 1947. And so building from that continuous investment in both Carnegie Mellon University and the University of Pittsburgh and the incredible work that they've done, whether that's in helping with the original work around transplantation at the medical center with partners like UPMC and others, to the Mellon College of Sciences at Carnegie Mellon University and a variety of other initiatives. So we're always looking for what are those new ways that philanthropy can be an effective partner in helping to advance these new innovations that we're discussing here. And when we found ourselves in early 2015 looking at our own strategic planning exercise, I think Secretary Siger said it well, that the planning is so essential to this work, that we took a step back and we're observing that there was incredible activity happening at both universities as a result of all the NIH and NSF and other research dollars, and that there was also a new type of company emerging from those ecosystems that was focused on physical products. We wanted to explore that more, so we brought on a team to help us look at the potential opportunities, and with a real desire to be as curious as possible about what are we missing, what are the things we're not seeing, where are those areas that the foundation could make a meaningful difference. And it was from that exercise that we came out on the other end, and biomanufacturing was revealed as an area that potentially the foundation could support different activities in that space, among many others. So, it's worth noting that same plan took us into the business of supporting the manufacturing of beer. So we could have a different panel about that topic if it's of
I'll
interest.
come back and moderate that.
There's a lot of similarity, believe it or not, between it and biomanufacturing. But what was really important was the partnerships that we had at the University of Pittsburgh, and they too were at this point of starting to think differently about, there's this incredible work happening with all the NIH-funded research. What are those ways in which they could support more commercialization activities, support more of the entrepreneurs who were also contending with this challenge of, if you want to make a biologic, where do you do that? How do you do that? And how do you pay for that? And we were getting data from multiple institutes and faculty members saying, wouldn't it be great if we had this? Our partners at UPMC were already in this space, developing these biologics for their own patients who were trying to overcome cancer. And so that led to a series of additional conversations and us going from that path of planning to implementation and In the case of the foundation, making the case for the largest gift that we've ever awarded for a single project, recognizing that the capital needed to get something like this off the ground was unlikely to come at that time from the private sector, also unlikely to come from the state or from federal sources. And so thankfully our trustees approved enabling this work, and it's been wonderful to see the partnerships that have formed since and for it to really kind of move in this incredible direction. And of course, a lot of other activity that is happening with our partners at Crystal Biotech and elsewhere.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Sam. Yeah, this is what I think I and others call it sort of a self-help strategy for kickstarting a new advanced industry. And one product of that is the organization that you're leading now, Ken, Pitt Bioforge. You've come back to Pittsburgh after some time away, running a series of successful large portfolios of science and technology investments. So what brought you back to lead Pitt Bioforge? Talk a little bit about what it is, why it's exciting, and what kinds of impacts you expect it to have at the kind of regional economic scale, but also locally in the Hazelwood Green neighborhood where you're located.
Sure, that's a long list. But let me get started by what attracted me about the opportunity. I'd say, given that most recent history of what I've been doing, there's a lot of promise and potential in precision biological medicines. We read articles about them every day, whether it's cell and gene therapy or CRISPR or CAR T. It's incredible the diseases and conditions that technology and those developments are solving and addressing. But then somewhere on page 3 or 4 of that article, or 7th screen scroll, you're hit with the sticker shock of how much those treatments cost. Upwards of anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million per therapeutic, per individual therapeutic, to upwards now with some of the other neurodegenerative diseases, $3 to $5 million per treatment. Well, at those sort of costs, that's not going to scale very much. That's not going to have the impact that it could and deliver on the promise and potential. And so manufacturing of these precision biologics is what needs to be addressed directly and deliberately, and to create the same potent type of innovations and breakthroughs in the manufacturing that are just as important as the innovations that came out of the research at University of Pittsburgh and elsewhere. And I'm old enough to remember when these things were the size of 2 bricks, and only investment bankers on Wall Street had them. Now, it wasn't a force of nature or just naturally that they turned into this. There were direct and deliberate people, companies, investments, innovations, and work that went into making them that small, that capable, that affordable, and that broad across the world. That's what we need in order for precision biological medicines to have that same impact, both broadly and equitably. So Bioforge, from my perspective, what was interesting to me was an opportunity to create that kind of driver, to be an organization that is focused on creating the breakthroughs and innovations in the manufacture of precision biological medicines to speed their delivery, use, and impact. I have that tattooed on my back, right? That's what it's about. That's what it's going to do. Now, one of the other things I've learned, it's not only enough to say what you're going to work on, but what's equally important is how you're going to work on it and how you're going to organize Bioforge. How are we going to go doing about our work that matches the need and the objective that we want to achieve? That comes from the last 30 or 40 years in my career of working at places like DARPA and Wellcome Trust, at Google, at Draper, and even with my own startup, the first time I boomeranged back in the 90s. And what that what this is going to require, how we're going to do our work, I've told you what our work is, how we're going to do our work is also completely different. And for that, I am thankful and appreciative to Chancellor Gable, Vice Chancellor Shekar at University of Pittsburgh, R.K. Mellon, Sam here, not only providing the resources, but giving me the freedom and independence to do it in a different way, in a way that sometimes doesn't feel as comfortable as doing it the traditional way, but is important if we're going to actually create the breakthroughs at the speeds and into quality and with the impact that we want. And so to put a quick nutshell around it, BioForge is going to be a very lean organization without a lot of permanent people, but in fact, there will be lots of people working at BioForge. How can that be? Well, what's going to be the basic element of work at BioForge is taking innovations and research coming out of University of Pittsburgh. You saw number 6 in NIH-funded research, and take the ones that have the potential and the impact for broad impact, bring them in when they are limited in their impact by the manufacturing, bring them into BioForge as a very focused, time-bound and budget-bound activity, bringing in small groups, a dozen people at most, of life scientists, biologists, cell scientists working side by side with roboticists, automation people, machine learning, microfluidics folks, whatever expertise is needed to solve that particular manufacturing challenge that's keeping a particular innovation from having impact. And giving them the resources, the agility to do what they need to do in a very fixed time frame. What do I mean by fixed time frame? I mean 18 to 36 months. In 18 to 36 months, you're going to solve that problem. You're going to have focused energy and commitment to it. And at the end, you may solve the problem and we go out with maybe a startup, or it could be a licensing deal. But if our reach is bold enough, some of those activities, we're at the end of 18, 36 months, we're going to say, good effort, everybody. It turned out to be harder than we thought. It's just not the right time. And here's the thing that makes many people uncomfortable. We're going to clear the decks. We're not going to keep funding, trying to keep it going, not because we don't think it's important, but because, as was pointed out earlier, the world is changing at even faster speeds. More innovations are coming along in the 18, 36 months that you spent working on that. And they deserve their shot at that. And we deserve and need to be agile and tack with where industry is going. What seems really promising today may be in the dustbin tomorrow. And a different technology, a different approach is coming along. So that's why BioForge, that's how we work, has to reflect being able to tack the innovations and growth in that area. So I think the last part of your question said, what's the impact on the region? I believe in maximizing the likelihood of success. I can't guarantee success, but I can maximize the likelihood that one of these projects and activities is successful. And then after that, it's just a matter of shots on goal. The more of these activities we can get in and support, and I think with the resources, the building being built in a couple of years, and the money that we have, we can support maybe a dozen and a half of these activities at any one time in steady state. So the key is for the region, maximize the likelihood of success by giving teams focused areas and support to work in within this lean BioForge organization. And after that is take as many shots on goal as you can. Some of them will stay here. Some of them may leave. But in some sense, BioForge can't be responsible for all of that. We've talked about how it's a community effort to do all that work. But what I'm going to focus on is giving this region as many maximum likelihood estimates of success shots as I can.
Don't make the shots you don't take, right? Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Ken. That's really exciting and I think speaks a lot to why you came back here to Pittsburgh for such a remarkable opportunity. Suma, so you came here a few years ago from the Bay Area. You're building a successful, now NASDAQ-listed life sciences company, Crystal Biotech, here in Pittsburgh. And this seems like a prime example of exactly what Sam and Ken are trying to make happen more often. You didn't come out of Pitt Bioforge because it's not there quite yet.
Exactly.
But I wonder, so what have you seen here in the region during your time that you think has contributed to Crystal's success that Pitt Bioforge could build on?
So unfortunately, when we started in Pittsburgh, we didn't have Bioforge, or I didn't know Sam, so that we could raise money to start Crystal Biotech. So my story is, I came from the Bay Area. As you know, Bay Area is, again, the center of innovation. They have many such bioforges and funding, plenty of them. In fact, it's so competitive. When we decided to start Crystal with the concept of basically treating a disease which was very close to my heart called epidermolysis bullosa. It's called one of the worst diseases among all of the rare diseases, because this is a disease where patients don't produce a protein called collagen 7 that holds your epidermis and dermis together, so the skin falls apart. So babies are born with missing skin. It's ultra rare, but devastating for parents and kids who have it. So the goal was to find a solution, a gene therapy. We had a concept and an idea, and the idea was put on pen, the patent was applied for, but we needed labs to get that concept, experiments started. Looked at all of the different opportunities within the Bay Area, heavily, completely taken, nothing was available. Bioforge, I hope you guys get there. Like the Bay Area, there was so much competition. I had no lab space available that I could immediately access. So I opened up my search to the entire country, and that's the journey to Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh, there was a lab that was readily available with some scientists with experience working with viral vectors. We decided to take over the lab, and start the experiments and see if this concept, self-funded initially with some friends and families. As I said, we didn't have the foundation. But we decided we'll do this experiment. If it fails, we walk away from Pittsburgh. So again, this was 2016. We started with 4 scientists. Fast forward, this is 2024. As you said, I'm so proud to say that the concept was feasible. We filed an IND in 2018, took the whole product through the regulatory process. We had the drug approved 2023. Now it's been almost 9 months. It's commercially available to these patients and benefiting many patients. So again, it's a very satisfying story, and it's not easy. I know people think, oh, you come in here 6 months, success story. It takes a lot of grit and a lot of hard work during COVID times. Again, the story I'm going to spin back and tell you why I did not move the company back to Pittsburgh. Obviously, one of my biggest concerns and challenges was getting the talent that I needed for this very high-tech, it's not just lab work, getting the preclinical studies, but as you said, comes back to manufacturing. It's not just manufacturing, but it's also developing your assays. As you know, they're very, very complicated. When you release something that is a gene therapy product, the regulations and the assays that surround them are very complex. So you have to develop these assays, release the product for these assays. So I realized outsourcing was not an option. If the speed that I wanted to get this product to, impossible. So we were very lucky in 2018. Again, this is not our first rodeo. We have taken 2 companies public. So we have, fortunately, followers and investors that believed in us. So we're very quickly, from 2018, we were able to go public into the NASDAQ, and I was able to raise money. That's the easiest way to raise money. But there are challenges that come with it too. So now rich with cash for us to proceed forward, we did build our own manufacturing facility, build our own labs to develop these assays. And again, it was initially a small little manufacturing facility, 20,000 square feet, enough clean rooms to get the concept going, get the phase 1, phase 2 study. We realized that we could not outsource, and we did everything in-house. Now, coming back to talent, I was very nervous about acquiring this talent. I mean, true, there were a lot of scientists that we were able to get from Pitt, Carnegie Mellon, some of the bioengineers, not only from this region, but Penn State. We have amazing bioengineers, young kids that took the risk, came to Crystal. Obviously, they were excited of just getting a job. Some of them with no experience. Fortunately, we had few experienced people. They trained, they had grit, excitement, never worked in a biotech company. And I can tell you, we would never be here with those resources and the kind of talent that we were able to not only bring in, train them, come up to speed. And think about it, getting a drug approved through the regulatory authorities, not easy. I mean, we had the FDA come visit our facility. There were 8 inspectors that came to the site. When you file your biological application, what happens is called a pre-BLA inspection, where 8 FDA high-tech inspectors come to a site. They felt, this is impossible. There can't be a company 5 years that build this and can have all of the regulatory requirements, from software to supply chain management to release of products to, all of the nuances that go around it has been established for this to be a commercial product. It was fascinating because they walked through our labs. We were very open. They were completely surprised with that transparency and the ability to, for them to talk to anybody in the lab or anybody on the manufacturing floor. In fact, some of the inspectors pulled out some of our scientists and says, where do you hire your people from? I can't believe it that you developed this assay in 3 years, validated them, and made them a commercial product. So that, a lot of pride that goes, in the local talent that we were able to get them, train them, and get to where we are. So again, it's not just the FDA. Now we are embarking on taking this product into Europe. We have filed our marketing application. We had the Dutch authorities come in, same reaction. We had very successful inspection. We are now going to file the application into Japan because this is a real ultra-rare disease, and the patients, it's a global disease. So we want to make sure that a product that's made in Pittsburgh, it can be distributed to and approved in the rest of the world.
Yeah,
so very proud of the talent that came out of Pittsburgh.
So maybe, right, one measure of success is 5, 10 years from now when FDA or Dutch inspectors come to Pittsburgh, they won't be so shocked that you're making world-beating drugs here, right? That this is just more par for the course. So I want to just quickly pivot and sort of ask you all in turn, this has been a sort of a self-help, self-start kind of enterprise thus far. What do you need next from a policy perspective, and who do you think should deliver it? Because this is election 24 issues at stake for them. What would you want voters and policymakers to see as really critical moves for the future growth and success of this industry in Southwest Pennsylvania? Let me start with you on that, Sam.
Sure. So, part of the BioForge story as well, and that you heard Suma describe, is the regulatory environment for CGPM facilities like this. And I think we're fortunate as well that we have a for-profit partner in Elevate Bio that will be the anchor tenant at the BioForge. And so that enables the work that Ken is doing in the sense that when a company is ready to perhaps scale its manufacturing, that they'll have that expertise there on site to be able to work directly across that, what had in the past been a barrier. But I think in terms of that regulatory environment of just how is that managed, how do you, Suma can offer her thoughtful experience here of how that's just changed even. So I don't want to speak on their behalf just in the last few years, but how that's becoming more difficult. The other thing that's interesting for me, and I think a part of this conversation that sometimes isn't discussed in the context of these big numbers, right? Like, how do we make the case to the federal government or the state government to make investments that are necessary in many cases, and where the risk capital is needed because you're unlikely to find it from the private sector during those early stages. But I reflect on my sort of passion of having read the Orphan Drug Act, and there's a way for the federal government to establish policy that isn't about picking winners or losers, but is based on, in that case, and the great work that Crystal and others are doing, of just the reality of the economics in that situation of where there's a disease that affects less than 200,000 people. It's very expensive to be able to develop a drug, to be able to get it to market, to get it through the FDA process. The economics are broken. There's a market failure. So creating the right incentives and then allowing for things to play out over decades is a very direct way where you can support the type of innovation that we're describing. And then at the state level, of course, I think everything that you heard Secretary Siger say, everything that the Shapiro administration is doing to support innovation in the region and throughout the rest of the state, thinking thoughtfully about, or being thoughtful about that connection to the rural parts of the state. The things that we're describing are still, for us at least, on the output stage of building buildings, establishing research programs, trying to build the connections to the Hazelwood community where the Bioforge is located. On the outcome side, everyone in this state, everyone in this country, everyone in the world potentially will benefit from the discoveries and the products that will come off that factory line when you think about it that way. Yeah. And that's the ultimate outcome that I think we're all striving for. Just how does this improve quality of life for anyone that's afflicted with these terrible diseases? And so on the policy side, I think we can do a better job of making that connection to, even if Bioforge or Crystal is located here in the epicenter of the urban core, in the rural communities where we also work, those advances are going to carry over. And the individuals working in those communities are going to have access to these jobs that are being created in these different places. So.
Well, thanks. Yeah, thanks for reminding me. That's part of advanced industries too, right? It's not just great jobs and economic output. It's human longevity and thriving, and I don't want to overlook those really important aspects. So thanks for that, Sam. What about you, Ken? What do you think is really needed next from a state, federal, or other policy perspective?
Well, I'll foot stomp on the regulatory elements, because the regulatory elements in place today are for billions of therapeutics that are the same, going to billions of people that need it and worrying about that distribution in the center, not the rare diseases in 200,000. So that has to keep pace as well. But I think when we talk about government, whether it's federal or state, having an impact on a new emerging technology or even a mature one, I look to the success. I look for ways in which the government has been successful in the past. And one of the areas that stands out is in semiconductor integrated electronics industry. Not the CHIPS Act, which is coming out now, but about 20 or 30 years ago, the US semiconductor industry was feeling pressure from Japan and Korea and Asia. And part of the response of the federal government wasn't just, okay, we need to put more into R&D or here or more into buying US-made materials, but rather what they did was step back and, working with the industry, said, what are the segments of the industry that make sense? So for example, there's a whole bunch of people in the ecosystem that make equipment for the people who make chips. Etchers, deposition systems, lithography. All those people were frozen in place because they were too small to make major investments in next generation technology without understanding whether the big manufacturers like Intel and Texas Instruments were going to buy that equipment. So just having a third-party, neutral, not pre-competitive set of discussions that gave visibility to those manufacturers as to what was coming next helped make the whole industry operate more efficiently and win back its position in terms of manufacturing. So I would look for those sorts of activities rather than huge injections of cash, which gets spent and then disappears. And you want to leave something behind.
Yeah, so solving for collective action problems in emerging industries too. Suma, anything you'd like to either foot stomp or add to the considerations for public policy and public action?
Again, I think it's more complicated in biotech or with regulators, right? I mean, you know, with the FDA, especially with advanced gene therapies, they struggle because people know they have a new division called as the super office because of, again, technology, they can't keep up. You know, because as you said, you have CRISPR-Cas9, you have genetic editing, in vivo editing, and the regulators can't keep up with the science that's happening. And there is a lot of education that goes back and forth, and sometimes you lose time because of that, because you want to go at the pace, you want to push these drugs. Parents who have these children with these diseases want the treatment now. So often within the FDA, you'll have Peter Marks or the head come out and say, we support rare diseases. We want to move CMC forward, and we want to not, get endpoints that can get to these patients. But sometimes they don't talk the walk, whatever.
I never know.
Yeah, what's up? And that's very frustrating because when you go start working with them at the very grassroots levels, they're struggling because all of the good reviewers, they've gone. The industry has taken them and they often say that when you go to meetings with them, they tease you, you take all our good people away. So then sometimes, and they hire really young graduate students who don't have industry experience, reading the guidance document and interpreting that and not into the science can be very challenging. And a lot of innovative companies who want to move forward really get stuck. So hope there's more pressure to bring the FDA to the, keep up with the new inventions, new requirements to release these drugs because they can't put the same standard. Like, as you said, we have 15 different tests to release a product that goes to like 10 patients. It's crazy. You can't, they don't care. You have to balance the safety and benefit, and that's why drugs are expensive, and you can't get these drugs because they need to meet all the standards, meet the specifications to get these patients in time.
Good. Well, I like that you guys are, I wish for all the economists in the audience, right, you're talking about unlocking new markets, you're talking about solving collective action problems, you're talking about promoting learning between the public and private sectors, and yes, a lot of money is good too, but there are other things to attend to in an emerging space like this that I think are really important. I think we have a couple minutes left, so let me just ask you all one last question. If this succeeds, if you hit escape velocity, what do you foresee for this region in 15 or 20 years' time, Sam? What's in your crystal ball?
Well, the aspiration is shared among this group, and you've heard it referenced of, Crystal being the example
that.
That
think about crystal ball, right? Oh yeah.
That we would seek to replicate as many times as we can. I think that the interesting part of our own history in this space of biotechnology is that you have Herb Boyer in the late 70s who attends St. Vincent, then goes to graduate school at the University of Pittsburgh, is truly a pioneer in the space of biotech, and is going west as we're contending with the collapse of the steel industry. And we can look at that case study to try and understand why, but the results are quite clear in terms of the impact Genentech had on this entire industry. And now fast forward, and we have Summa coming in the reverse direction to the East Coast and forming a company here that you can imagine over time is the talent that's being developed there, the talent that will be developed at Bioforge will start to spin off in ways. And if we can take advantage of kind of these assets that are necessary parts of the infrastructure in the case of biomanufacturing and making all of the advancements in that space that Ken and the team are pursuing, and then also having these great companies that people can go to work for so that they can learn and they can think about, well, how could they contribute and maybe start their own company? If we end up with something that even remotely resembles what one can observe in either Mission Bay or in Cambridge, and where every student coming out of Carnegie Mellon and Pitt and every other university where they're training kids to be part of the life sciences industry doesn't have to think twice about whether they want to stay in Pittsburgh or not. I think, and then the profound benefits that will accrue to all of us, of course, as a result of that. I think for us as a foundation, that's the aspirational goal.
And Summa, when we talked, you said you felt kind of alone when you got to
Very
Pittsburgh,
lonely.
right?
It was very lonely.
I don't know how lonely you're feeling right now, but maybe you feel less lonely in the future.
No, I don't want to move out of Pittsburgh now because I think the talent, we've gone from 4 to 250 employees and growing because now we're growing in Japan and in Europe. Out of the 250, we have 170 employees in Pittsburgh. These are high-paying jobs. These are not, these are bioengineers, scientists, and so it's very gratifying when I see the dedication and the love that they have, and the passion and the excitement, and they feel like they're a part of the story. Just makes me feel that the community here and the culture, and sometimes in the Bay Area or in those regions is a very different, value systems, because I think it's more privileged here. I feel the people are much rooted, they work hard. It's that mentality to, give their best. Yeah. So that's really, it touched my heart, and for me, I think Pittsburgh is my home now.
Oh, good. Well, that's a perfect place to end. It's an applause line. Join me in thanking our wonderful panel, Sam, Ken, and Suma. Okay, so I think now I have the privilege to pass the baton once more to a great friend and Brookings colleague of mine, Mark Miro, to bring up our third panel on the Build Back Better Regional Challenge here in Southwest Pennsylvania. Thank you all.
Great to see everybody. Let's talk about a third effort now at place-based industrial development in this region. My name is Mark Muro, Senior Fellow at Brookings Metro. I want to ask our next panel about the Southwest Pennsylvania New Economy Collaborative, the region's effort to broaden its already strong world-class robotics and autonomy cluster, and to make sure that it reaches into every corner of the 11-county region, including rural, coal-impacted, and otherwise underrepresented workers. So this is a very important initiative. To that end, the federal government here is the instigator in some ways in helping the region implement local plans to promote tech diffusion on the one hand and expand the AI and robotics workforce. We've got, at the same time, the federal program has sought to convene new local partnerships, and so to develop a truly systematic approach in the region to creating growth and opportunity in the key sector. Maybe that could be the ultimately most important element in some ways. So let's talk about that. Given that, I think we have three great informants here to discuss the New Economy Collaborative. Ben Pratt, to my far right, your left, works for the Allegheny Conference and is the collaborative's leader, its regional economic competitiveness officer. Sherry McCleary is executive director of Digital Foundry at Penn State New Kensington. She's going to talk about that and what it is, but this is a state-of-the-art hub for future readiness, I would say, in the whole Pittsburgh region, as well as the edges of the region, but also across the whole region. And then Rob Cherry is the CEO of Partner for Work, the region's major workforce development organization, and he's really breathing a lot of energy into this. So let's talk about this. We're going to go through. First, Ben, since you're the collaborative's lead, its regional economic competitiveness officer, I'd like to hear your distilled elevator pitch. You've probably given it 5 million times by now, but give us that sense exactly on the core intent of the collaborative.
Sure. Well, thank you all again, Brookings, for having us. And a number of our community partners had a vision a long time ago of how we can as Secretary Siger mentioned, leverage incredible resources that are coming out of the federal government and really emphasize and capitalize on the strengths and assets of our region. And the Build Back Better Regional Challenge Grant is a multiple phased application process that really requires a community to come together to build a coalition on a shared vision, and that's fundamentally necessary. And as that group came together, they categorized an application for our 11-county project area. It's really a 12-county regional effort to figure out and establish a strategy to make sure that we not only bridge the gap of the workforce development needs that we have in an emerging cluster like robotics and technology, but also create an environment where we help bridge the gap between de-risking and the adoption of robotics and technology for our advanced manufacturing and, frankly, other high-growth industry clusters of the region. So we have 3 core principles of the Build Back Better initiative: the de-risking for robotics and technology systems with an emphasis on advanced manufacturing, the upskilling and workforce development strategies, and how are we creating the commercialization infrastructure necessary to support those key tenants and those thriving startup ecosystem developers in the robotics and technology and innovation ecosystem as well. So.
It strikes me, just to follow up one quickly, it seems like beyond then addressing material tech and workforce issues, it seems like this must have been a kind of elaborate forcing mechanism to help the region get on the same page in one important area. Is that fair to say? Is that important or not?
I'll say I had the privilege of coming in as the Regional Economic Competitiveness Officer from out of market, and it was one of the most eye-opening experiences to finally see, not finally, but to see, frankly, the level of coordination across levels of infrastructure and community partnerships, from regional industrial development corporations to workforce development partners, city, county, local economic development partners, and educational institutions and workforce training providers, all coming together under the premise of defining and establishing a shared need. And so, yeah, it was a concerted effort. I wish I could have been part of phase 1, but it's great to come home and get to help coordinate phase 2 execution.
So I guess an accelerator. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, Sherry, why don't you fill us in a little bit on, what Digital Foundry is and does, and its association with the Penn State system, and help us understand that a little
absolutely.
bit. Yeah.
So again, like everyone else, I want to thank Brookings, CMU, and Pitt for having us here to be a part of this very important conversation. The Digital Foundry, we're a fairly new player in this space. We moved into our new building in downtown New Kensington in the heart of a Rust Belt, classic kind of Rust Belt community. And we exist, we moved into that space just not quite 2 years ago, and we exist to provide access to training and education. And in that space, we span from programming we're doing for K through 12, programming for our university students, but also a lot of workforce training, unique workforce training that we've developed specifically focused on digital technologies for manufacturing, and it spans from those entry-level opportunities all the way to engineers who've been in the field for a while. And the second piece of what we do, in addition to education and training, is all about technical assistance and de-risking with local manufacturers. We felt from the very beginning that it was necessary to invest in the talent, but that talent had to have somewhere to go and stay in the region to apply those skills. And on the flip side, the employers, if they wanted to continue to advance their competitiveness with new technologies, had to know that they had the skilled workers in their own backyard that they could pull on and depend on. So we see those two things going very much hand in hand, the training of the workforce, both new and incumbent, and that help with regional manufacturers to remain competitive in new technologies.
What's the geography of this a little bit? And then how's the Build Back Better Regional Challenge affecting this or boosting it or accelerating it?
So our reach is all of the 11-county southwestern PA region. Okay. While we were put in place to specifically address, as I said, a Rust Belt community that had certainly seen better times. We also recognize that there's a need across those thousands of manufacturers that Petra mentioned who sit in our region. And the Build Back Better challenge has been an incredible opportunity to not create something that we didn't already have as part of our vision, but to accelerate and plant more seeds more quickly to get towards our goals and our visions. Our vision is that we will improve lives and strengthen businesses through access to digital technology, and the Build Back Better fits squarely in supporting that vision.
So in your case, it's broadened or boosted relationships and initiatives that were mostly already in place, would you say, or?
They weren't mostly already in place. It was our vision, and
okay.
it was our
Vision,
strategy and our plan, and we were working towards that. And I think this has just allowed us to accelerate it. It has strengthened collaborations with other educational institutes, other service providers in our region. I think it's creating a very, very powerful coalition that we hope will keep this going for many, many years to come.
Great. Yeah, do you want to, Rob, give us a little sense of how the collaborative is maybe affecting your work, and maybe introduce Partners for Work briefly as well?
Sure. Partner for Work is the workforce development board for the city of Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. And Build Back Better has, allowed us to flex a muscle that we haven't necessarily been able to flex in a while. And that's really coordinating with other workforce boards in a real, intentional, regional way. And so historically, you have different workforce development boards working with companies differently. Through pool funds, we've all had to kind of come together and, be able to focus on specific businesses together. And so what did we find out doing that? That we need to align our policies better, because when a business comes to this area, and as Petra talked about, they want to explore incumbent worker or OJT policies. They don't care where it comes from. They want it all to look the same. And what we found out is that I have a different OJT policy than another board, and they have to work with the same company. So this grant has allowed us to align policies in a way that really helps the employer. If these training programs don't truly benefit employers, they're just not going to work. And this grant has really allowed us to kind of come together and make sure that these things are working together, that it's actually working for employers, which benefits our clients, which are job seekers, to make sure that we can train them in the best way to get them rapidly attached to a job with as little barriers as possible. Was it the funding kind of created leverage, or the need to compete for it? Well, what would you say? The best part about the grant sometimes is the planning part to actually build the grant, to actually get folks together in a room talking about different topics, talking about strategies in regards to how we're going to work regionally with businesses, and then implement that. And then along the way, you're still going to hit some bumps in the road, but you're working together to figure those out. Yeah. So this real regional way of working together is something that, we're finding out that works really well between all of us, but B, really works well for companies, and it's something that we can do a lot more of in the future with or without a grant.
Interesting. Are there a couple examples of areas where, particular occupational initiatives or skills?
So one is working with a new manufacturer called Rebuild. And that's where we found out that those OJT and incumbent worker policies weren't necessarily aligned. And all the boards together are working to align those. Now, is it easy? No, because what we found out is that I pay for a different amount of hours than some other boards, but we're aligning these as much as possible, especially on the paperwork side. A company shouldn't have to necessarily create a whole different division just to deal with the paperwork of what a workforce board has to deliver as far as services to them. We should streamline those things as much as possible. And that's what we're doing, and we're doing it because of this collaboration.
That's really useful. Ben, I want to circle back around to you and ask, okay, this is a federal grant. It's bigger and different and so on, but it's also a federal grant with likely some of the challenges of all federal grants. So I'm just wondering, how do you look at, the positives and negatives or the challenges and advantages of this particular initiative?
Sure. Well, we were awarded $63 million under the Build Back Better initiative. No small sum, but over 4 years, we were awarded in September of 2022, and we had 4 years to deploy a comprehensive workforce development strategy that pairs well with a de-risking strategy while trying to support an emerging commercialization strategy for some of the fastest moving technology in the country. And we have 4 years to do it. And if you don't spend the money by the end of the 4 years, then you lose the opportunity to spend those monies. So I echo everything that Rob just described, and I think you could also apply 4 other applications of the ways that we've benefited from Build Back Better to particularly support the Rebuild project and how they are an advanced manufacturer that are going to be leveraging some of the training and tools that we're going to support through a number of our workforce development partners, but also, we, as the power of convening, has helped us create an ecosystem here that works so well together in some of this fastest moving growth technology and advanced manufacturing clusters that we are setting the groundwork necessary for us to build momentum, and momentum gets built over time. So I would say time is our biggest challenge. Part of me loves the fact that we have a time clock because it pushes us to move faster and harder. And one thing that I really appreciate from all of our partners is after we finish something, it's usually, wow, what could we have done better for that so that we can keep doing it better moving forward. So our foundations community and our public-private partnership of the New Economy Collaborative Board are looking at this as not just a one-and-done grant, but how are we building the sustainability effort of this convening power moving forward? Because that's what's going to make us competitive as a region and these competitive environments, particularly for economic development moving forward.
How do you think about the time clock? I mean, there's literally a clock in the...
We have 2.5 years left, and one of the biggest challenges is, how do you build workforce development training programs in that time frame to support these high-growth industries, especially through accreditation processes. We have 12 different workforce development partners throughout our 11-county region that are trying to map and soundboard and make sure that they are building training programs that meet the needs of the advanced manufacturers and other industry segments like life sciences, manufacturing, et cetera. So that process in and of itself presents challenges because in the 4 years, the first year is just building out the workforce program, then telling everyone the workforce program is out there, and then matching that workforce program to those employers in the hope that they can somehow get through a workforce program to meet a job placement goal by the end of this so that you can demonstrate the return on impact of those federal funding. So some of it may have been bullish, but I do think that our partners are up to the challenge, and frankly, we're shooting for it because we realize that the biggest opportunity that we have is the demonstration of our ability to do the work.
I want to ask you two each also about the value or challenge of that pressure. It sounds like Ben is seen as a very beneficial aspect of this.
Yeah, there's a huge benefit and opportunity. And in particular, I want to speak to working with those small to medium-sized manufacturers in our region and helping them to overcome that initial hurdle to just consider where technology may be able to help them to differentiate themselves, to keep themselves more competitive. That's not an easy thing to do in a small company when you have limited resources and you're trying to keep your employees fully engaged, make payroll, get products out the door. You're not thinking about what's coming 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road that's going to allow you to sustain yourself. So we're a team of engineers who have worked in manufacturing, who are bringing our expertise to help others to take that first step. And it would be really difficult to do if we had to ask them not only to take that first step of risk and to engage some of their precious limited resources, but also ask them to pay for that on the front end. So these funds are allowing us to take some of that risk off the table by coming in and being a part of their team, not asking that they pay for it up front, asking that they allow us to come in, walk their operations, understand where technology can help them, understand where and how to invest. And all of those things on the front end that can be a huge hurdle and a big fear for companies to take the first step. So the huge opportunity here is a chance to allow them to take that first step by taking some of the risk off the table. The challenge, Ben said it very well, is very much that there are limited dollars and there's limited time. There's those finite dollars and finite amount of time only go so far, especially as you're starting to really start up a lot of things that are new initiatives. Yep. So while it's going to seed a lot of opportunities, there's an incredible amount of cultivation before we can harvest those from those seeds. And I think that the challenge is how will we continue to sustain the momentum that we're building in this very finite period of time and money that we have.
So it concentrates the mind really well, right?
Yes.
Rob, it sounds like I'm interested in the new challenges being imposed on you, or it sounds like you view these as there are new demands being placed on the system, given this program. I think probably beneficial ones. Wondering how you look at it.
Absolutely. So there's good challenges, and one challenge that we've seen that we have is kind of in our environment here, is that with these investments, unlike other places, so you have like Intel, Microsoft, these are very big companies that have advanced teams, like Sherry was talking about, that can go talk to government, go create training programs with community colleges and universities. And we have more of just a scattered approach here. But it kind of puts an emphasis on our value of kind of our sector intermediaries. There's a lot of manufacturers here. And to have these intermediaries like this be able to speak for so many different companies is really an asset here. And so while we don't have this one big company that we're kind of driving policy and initiatives towards, we do have many different ones, and we do have very good representation as far as intermediaries that speak for those companies that help us create curriculum, align training programs, things like that. So it's a lot of work in a little bit of time, but it's something that we're very aggressively going after, and I think it will yield very good results. You may not see them immediately, but you will see them down the line.
How about the challenge to include underrepresented or people, regions, micro areas, organizations, types of businesses, rural, seems like that creates a kaleidoscope of, really issues that you really are asked to face the music on.
It does, in a few different ways. One is that the technology is changing rapidly. Yeah. We're always trying to figure out ways to career pathway and scaffold these things down from the person in your organization who's very highly technical, all the way down to what Petra talked about, that entry-level person who you're going to have to create training for at the door. And so to be able to rapidly work on that consistently, company by company, that is a challenge. The good thing about that is that we're actually doing it. And so we're able to create these pathways for folks now that who did not see an opportunity for themselves in some of these neighborhoods or populations, that now can see a way in, that knows that these emerging technologies are coming here and will stay here now because they see opportunity for themselves.
It's not, it's being required to. you can't postpone this work. Let's begin to think about the future here. I think, clearly this is a one-time surge, wondering what's needed to build on this grant. A colleague, David Johnson, and I wrote about the sustainability problem of these initiatives. It sounds like you guys are giving it, pretty good reviews as a way to accelerate things that need to be built in the region. Where does this head? What is needed to build on this grant?
Well, I'll just say I think we have some incredible leaders on our New Economy Collaborative Governing Board, and I think they do see that the sustainability of bringing people together as a coalition is critical to moving a lot of this stuff forward beyond the federal funding period. I think that's one element that I would argue is one of the most important, is continue to create policies that establish benefits or incentives of convening as a coalition. I think that we're seeing ways that we can do that through the creation of the Pittsburgh Life Sciences Association, and ways that we can establish coalitions around clusters that can bring public-private partners in the philanthropy community together around a shared vision, around a cluster, and continue to encourage this type of convening so that you can establish all of the infrastructure partners at the table and bring everyone together like we were able to do, the leadership was able to do.
In the end, you're charged with transforming the robotics and autonomy cluster in southwestern Pennsylvania. It's a tall ask, isn't it?
And there's, and the work, frankly, needs to continue beyond 4 years. And so, Rob's team is one of the best out there, and frankly, I just think that there's a lot of the things that we've talked about from robotics and technology and advanced manufacturing. Some of the biggest challenges that we have are cultural shifts and education within the industry segments, from an emerging industry cluster transitioning from actively pursuing investment funding and VC funding to be thinking about, there's incumbent training dollars out there that can support my workforce development initiative, is a cultural shift that they have from transitioning from a 2 to 5, 10 person startup to an established 40 person, 60 person entity that's looking for ways that they can compete in upskilling their workforce. So we have some cultural things and culture shifts take a lot longer than 4 years sometimes. So,
Sherry, how about for your organization? You have the shot clock is running. How do you see this then informing where you're heading over the next 5 years, 10 years?
Our strategic plan is very much, I think, kind of and our organization is very much a microcosm of what's happening here in the region. And it's very clear when we look at the demand and the need, and the fact that technology is changing so rapidly, that demand and that need is not going to go away. It's only going to accelerate the demand and the need for upskilling, the demand and the need for keeping manufacturers and businesses current in technology. And so what has become incredibly clear is that this cannot be done with federal funding alone, with state funding alone, with private funding alone, that we have got to find a way that this continues to be a strategy that pulls in a coalition of partners across the private sector, the federal and the state sector. And so I think we have, as an organization, recognized that we're not going to get there through any one of those avenues alone. And I think that, like I said, that's very much a representation of what we see across the region in general, is we've got to find a way to continue to use this momentum to bring all the right parties to the table to continue to make investments, because it is an investment and it's a long-term investment.
I mean, we are, heading towards the election. I think it's in 24, right? How would you look at it, Rob? What is needed here? Including, do we need an extension of this, or a 2.0 version, or how do you think about it as far as the future?
Absolutely, just not a 2.0. I think we need a 3.0, a 4.0. We could use about 4, Build Back Better. And And the reason is because things are changing so rapidly. And in order to truly compete and keep up, we need to continuously have these type of investments. So much is changing so fast that, 7, 8 years ago, we didn't, at least I wasn't thinking about, that I was going to incorporate AI in my job or these things that we're experiencing right now. We'll continue with this type of growth over the next 10 years. But there's a different dynamic here. Is that this is also one of the oldest regions, in the United States. And that takes a different approach and a different strategy also. There really has to be a talent attraction part of this that looks a little bit different than other places in the United States. So definitely more investment like these for this region.
Can I just add on that real quick?
Go ahead.
I just think that is so important, what Rob just said and what Sherry said. A lot of the things that we're doing takes time to aggregate everything that we are doing to communicate the impact so that it can inform both local, state, and federal policy. And that policy information, like informing policy, is a long-term process as well. So, we're incredibly beneficial and grateful for this, this governor's administration keeping a keen eye on everything that we're doing with Build Back Better and being fundamentally supportive in this type of effort and work. You've heard Rick talk about how they're leveraging that type of infrastructure to continue to perpetuate that motion and the momentum. But the work that we're going to do and continue to do, we hope we can communicate our findings and can continue to evolve the process itself as well, because we want everything that we're doing, we're going to learn from, and we need that type of continued recognition of the power of convening around this type of infrastructure so that we can inform the next version as well.
Would you say that you're deeply involved in sustainability planning from the very beginning here, or now it's you're heading towards the challenge?
I think that leadership in this community is always looking at what's next. I think that's what's so incredibly refreshing about our leaders, CMU and in Pitt and at our private sector entities and philanthropists. I honestly think that they're as soon as we secured it, they're thinking about, great, now we understand it in the context of what's next. And so we're always thinking about how we're going to perpetuate and build on what we're doing. And I think that's what's so exciting about being here now.
Excellent. Well, thank you for these excellent insights. It falls to me to round out the morning here. To do that, I do want to first just thank our partners at CMU and Pitt and all kinds of people across the organization, across the region that have been very helpful. Thank you to our great speakers, these and others, for the day. And I just want to note a couple things. Recalling, President Rouse's note that 78% of Americans believe too little attention is being paid to important issues like this, I would say, I hope you feel this forum's, been useful on that front. But and meanwhile, if you want to learn more about this and other issues that matter, please check out the Brookings website. We have a page dedicated to election 24. There's a QR code here that gets you right there. There's a lot of information on past, present, and future efforts of this sort that we're doing all year. You'll find more information about this topic as well. I think we'll have Alan's deck up there and other resources like that. And we have upcoming events like this around the country and online elsewhere. So for now, I just want to say thank you for joining us this morning here and on the webcast. Have a good day, and we'll see you in the future. So thanks so much. Yeah.